But for those of you who don't know, my name is Christina Joy Whittaker. I am a leadership strategist and coach, and I partner with professionals who are ready to shift to their next level. My goal with these particular Mentor Monday sessions is really to provide that safe space to give you the agency and empower you to define truly what that next level means for you. I know a lot of times as ambitious professionals, we get down paths and we accumulate a lot of success. We get a lot of awards, we get a lot of recognition, but sometimes you find that your goals have shifted or your vision expands and you find yourself on a path that you've either outgrown or you're just ready to experience something new. Now, the way I partner with people is typically you've either seen me in the corporate space. I might have come to your company and done a session on a workshop, and you've kind of followed me along here. And to you all, I say welcome. So I partner with companies. I've worked with organizations like McDonald's, the NBA, Lockheed Martin, and Target, just to name a few. So you might have seen me in action there. You might have also seen me as a coach. I know some of you are previous clients of mine. Some of you are current clients of mine. And I love all of you. My clients have been able, I think I personally have the best clients ever. I love the visions that they come to me with. I love what they are looking to do in this world, in whatever industries they are. I think the common denominator is that everyone who comes to me is already experienced. You already know you have that brilliance. You already know that you have that talent. It's just a matter of how do you get that clarity and how you get that courage to take the next step into where you're looking to go into. And a lot of the people who come to me are looking to transition into thought leadership or to add that on to their regular 9-to-5s. And we do that either through private coaching or through my group coaching program, the Corporate Speaker Masterclass. And then finally, in this vein that I'm working with you all, because I've worked with so many amazing people, I wanted to extend an opportunity to connect even more in depth with people on a regular basis and to just hear the everyday questions that might pop up. I know during the week, during your day-to-day, sometimes we have these lofty goals, but things pop up and sometimes you just want clarity on something, or sometimes you just need a thought partner or a brain partner. And so that's why we really crafted these Mentor Monday sessions. So I hope they are helpful. We're going to be meeting weekly, at least through the month of August, and then we'll assess the cadence afterwards. But I'm so happy for everyone who's here right now. And for anyone who just joined in, if you weren't able to submit a question, I'll say it one more time. You can go ahead and use the Q&A function. Or if I'm reading a question that's similar to something that you want to ask or you would have asked and you want to kind of piggyback on that, go ahead and put that in the chat and I'll be sure to look out. And if I didn't see it, just raise your hand or kind of flag me down in the chat and I'll be sure to circle back and answer the question. But I'm incredibly excited to get started today. And we're going to kick off with an awesome question. So question number one we have is, if you are new to an organization, how do you position yourself for leadership or promotion? I think this is a great question because a lot of us are in time periods where, especially in the last few years since the pandemic, where you might either be newer in a role or you have been in an organization for a while and transitioned into a new role. A lot of us are also facing transition of some sort that might not have been your choice. So whether that's a layoff, whether that was a downsizing, whether you had to relocate for certain reasons, I believe the highest percentage probably ever of people who are experienced professionals who are really in the thick of trying to navigate and to understand, how do I really make my mark, or how do I position myself for promotion in this particular role? Now, before I think I'm going to answer this in a way that you might not be expecting, but first, I just want to lay the groundwork in saying that I believe you're already a leader. And so I just want to reframe the question a little bit. I don't think it's necessarily positioning yourself for leadership roles because you already have that leadership component. You already have an expertise that you have mastered. You already have a talent or a skill that is in demand because you got the job. And so I believe right now, the broader question is, how do you accelerate, or how do you move up, or how do you advance in the organization in general? So that's what I'll speak to more than anything. And I know that this decision can come at various times of your career. It could come at entry level, it could come at your mid-career, or it can even come a lot later as you're looking to transition or add things on close to retirement. So at any point in time, there's going to be a time where you need to answer this particular question. So here's what I'll say to this in terms of how do you position yourself for promotion within your organization? I think the number one thing you have to understand is that before you do anything, you must define what promotion means for you at this time in your life. Obviously, within an organization, there's a set hierarchy. There are set roles that you need to perform. There are set skills that you need to perform. And typically, at an organization, if it has a couple of people, like probably greater than 25 or so people, 50 or so people, there's some sort of hierarchy. There's some sort of career ladder. There's some sort of corporate ladder with defined positions that elevate your status. Now, the reason why I say it's so important for you to define what promotion looks like for you right now is because the next step on the ladder may not necessarily be what you're looking for in terms of how you see yourself progressing in life. I'll give you an example. I was working with one particular client and she knew she wanted to get promoted. However, and she was a senior manager at the time. And so the next step would have been, I think, for her, director level. She was in a space where she had 2 small kids at home. She did need that flexibility of time. She wanted a status boost in terms of her title, but she didn't have any more time to be on site. This and going up another level, and that director level would have required her to be on site a lot more than what she was willing to do. And so if you look at all of the parameters of the role that she wanted to go into, it really wouldn't have been a promotion for her at that time because it was taking something that was most valued to her in that moment, which was her time freedom. And so what we had to do was really reevaluate, okay, if the next rung for director is not necessarily what's going to meet your goals at this time, what's an adjacent role or what's something that still allows you to get that time freedom, to get the financial goals that you want, get the status boost that you want, but also not compromise what you have prioritized in a list of the things that you most value. And so the only way we were able to do that was to get incredibly be incredibly thorough about what are the things that mattered to her. So what I would say is in reference to a process of defining what promotion means for you right now at this time, I want you to look at your finances. Financially, where do you want to be? And I mean financially in a broad stroke sense. So your salary, what are the perks? Do you get stock options? What are the benefits? Do you get, your gym paid for? What's your healthcare look like? I mean, the whole scope of the financial state that you would like to be in. What's the work-life balance that you're looking for? What does time freedom mean to you? Do you need more flexibility in time? Are you okay with sacrificing some time for a particular role? And that's only something that you can answer. So be very honest about that. In terms of networking opportunities, what does this next role now give you access to that you don't currently have access to, that you would want access to? What are the projects? What's the emotional toll? If you're looking to transition either within your organization or if you're even entertaining roles that are outside of your organization, do you care about company reputation? Like, do you want a big name or are you okay with like a mom and pop shop? Like, does that matter to you? Also, I really want you to evaluate like what level of energy do you actually want in this role? Do you actually want to have something that's challenging, or do you need something that you can kind of coast in? There's no wrong answers to these. It's a matter of what you actually want for yourself, what's going to matter most for your life right now, and ranking the priority of the things that are most important, but understanding that as you're looking for these advanced opportunities, anything that doesn't align with your priority is not a promotion for you. So don't fall in the cycle. Don't fall in the habit of just believing that just because there's a title bump to something, or just because someone is telling you, hey, this is a promotion for you, that it actually translates to being beneficial for you in that particular moment. Especially, for instance, for you, maybe job security is a big thing. And maybe this next rung, you see a higher attrition rate at that level. I know for something, I was being offered a promotion at a particular consulting agency I was working at. And I looked at the lifestyles of everyone in that particular rung. And I decided for me, I didn't want it. Like, if I were going to get promoted, it was not within that organization. I didn't mind taking a bump someplace else, but I did not like the life that I saw of the people who were in that particular space. And so once you define what promotion looks like and feels like to you, then you have the ability to make a decision, right? Then you can decide, okay, does this role align with what I want? If yes, then go ahead and proceed and position yourself in terms of getting to know the decision makers, understanding the parameters of the role, what needs to be done now, or what's the path of least resistance to getting that particular role. And there's a lot of different ways to do that. Another thing that you can also evaluate is there space for you to craft a role? Is there space for you to basically identify a niche or identify a need and then position yourself around it so that you are the one filling that need, but it also gives you the agency and the flexibility to craft a role that you want. That's something that one of my clients recently did. She was able to get a $1.2 million win, but she also crafted her dream role because she saw a gap in the department that she was in. And so she was like, you know what? This gap needs to be filled. How do I write a job description? How do I position myself to get this, to fill this need that they have not yet understood is there? And so we were able to craft a strategy around that. And then finally, assessing whether or not that promotion, after you've done your own priority, does that promotion exist in your organization? Sometimes the answer is yes, and sometimes it's no. But at that time, if the answer is no, then you have a decision that needs to be made. So I hope that's helpful in terms of the broader sense of understanding what it means to position yourself for promotion. I think that's a great question, because especially as you get older, especially as you have more experience, it seems more narrow in terms of the possibility that you can take your leadership, but I don't want you to fall into the trap of believing that there's not other options for you, or that you've put in so much time, you put in so much work, and that someone else is not going to be able to understand that value. Above all else, understand that your personal value and what you bring to a workspace, especially in terms of your skill or expertise, may or may not be valued at your organization, but regardless, it's always portable. It's something that you can either do for yourself, it's something that you can do for someone else, but it's yours to fully craft that around. It just probably takes a set plan, set strategy, set time to really define what that might look like. So I hope that's helpful for that particular question. If anyone has any piggyback, you can go ahead and put it in the chat. But for now, I am going to shift to our question number 2. And question number 2 is from Vanessa. Vanessa says, how do I get around people? Sorry, this question is funny. How do I get around people always asking for my advice and expertise for free? In my role as a sorry, I don't know why that made me laugh. In my role as a senior leader, I know that many people want my buy-in or my opinion. While I freely give this to those I work with, it's difficult for me to navigate that outside of my company. I'd like to transition to full-time entrepreneurship at some point in my career, but I'm still putting the pieces together. However, when I'm faced with this type of behavior, I become hesitant. Understandable. And then she kind of has a follow-up that says, to be honest, sometimes it feels like people are being predatory in this particular sense. Vanessa, awesome question. And here's what I'll say to that. I think that's a great point, because if I recall in your question, you were saying that you already are a senior leader. And so there's this nuance at play where in your particular role, because of your position, because of your title, because of your expertise and what you've already demonstrated, people obviously or organically are going to want to get your opinion and to get information from you or listen to you or glean some of your expertise, which is understandable, right? Like, they're in a space and you are in a space where you can mentor people or offer that bit of information. But it sounds like the angst that you're saying is that you don't necessarily mind doing that within the context of your organization, but because of your role, it has attracted other people. And now it seems like people are just kind of being predatory. And I think the term is just like they're picking your brain. They're just kind of asking you for free advice. Here's what I'll say to that. People are only bothered by people picking their brain when they feel like they're being taken advantage of, or they feel like they know that there's something there and they have not had the time to figure out like how to put a business model around it. Because really, regardless, it wouldn't matter as much, for instance, if you felt like if you felt free to give it. So to me, it's sounding like there's some internal angst and probably some desire to systemize the way your mentorship is done. And I think that's completely fair. Just because you are a high level in an organization does not mean your information and your resources and your expertise is free for all, or, should be accessed by all. What I would say is taking a step back. If you look at the questions that you're getting, both internally within your organization as well as externally within your organization, what you see right now is that there is clear demand. People have a demand for your knowledge. Now, I don't even want to go down the rabbit hole of asking, in particular, what that demand looks like, or the nuance of that demand, or the topic of that demand, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. The fact is, people are asking you questions and they want something from you, which creates demand, or which means that there's a demand. Your frustration is that right now you don't have a set system behind this demand to allow either people to be a filter for you or allow people to buy into your expertise in a way that you can also profit or you can also benefit, which is understandable. So what I would say is really hone in and focus on what are the systems that you need to put in place to allow people to experience you in a way that they understand that this isn't necessarily just a casual, I can pick her brain and get whatever. The only reason that people do this is because there's no system in place. There's a missing system. And so whether that means you're putting them through an application process, whether that means they have to send you a certain type of email, whether that means they have to book time with you on a calendar, however that system is, it's our responsibility, especially as I know you are someone who wants to shift into thought leadership in general, especially paid thought leadership for your expertise, and you're at the level and you're at the experience where that is possible. What's important for you right now is to start teaching people how to treat you in that arena. And so understanding that sometimes you might have to pull back your access. Sometimes in terms of their questioning, you can let them know, hey, I want to make sure I answer your question. This is the system, or this is the way that I typically engage people. If people want you to come speak, if you don't have a system in place, then they're going to assume your price is free. They're going to assume there's nothing there, right? They're going to assume that your expertise is for free. And so in absence of having a due process, in absence of having a due system for people, that's when people start basically making assumptions about how to treat you, basically how to work with you. And so more than anything, I think there needs to be some clarity in what you actually want to offer and how you actually want to put a system or systemize your advice, systemize your mentorship. Understanding that within your organization, since you don't have a problem with that, within your organization, that's fine. You can be free and give, mentorship as needed. If the volume is too much, I would say like maybe implement some office hours or something along those lines. But externally, there's a business opportunity. There's a business opportunity there. And so that would take a different level of intentionality. That's something that I do partner with people with to set up their systems, to learn like how, if I want to switch into speaking, or if I want to switch into being a paid, not switch, but add in being a paid thought leader, a paid expert, or positioning my program or my curriculum, whatever it may be, in a way that people will do business with me. That's when you have to be intentional about building out that system. So I hope that's helpful for that. With that question, I will pause again and say, if you didn't have an opportunity to submit a question ahead of time, you can always submit questions in the Q&A function on this webinar at the bottom. Hi to everyone who I didn't say hi to, who has joined since I've started. We are only 2 questions in, so you haven't missed that much, but a replay will be sent out, so you'll be able to access it. But if there's any clarification or any additional questions, go ahead and use the Q&A chat function, and I will be sure to allow you to access it from there. So the next question I have is from Mona. And Mona says, I've worked in my organization for almost 30 years, and I know that I'm ready for some sort of change. It's a little embarrassing to admit, but I feel so scattered. On one hand, I'm ready. On one hand, I'm ready. Oh, I see. On one hand, I'm ready. On the other hand, I'm asking myself, ready for what? Fair question. I know I want to share my story and my experience, but at this stage in my career, I have something to, and she has in quotation marks, I have something to lose, i.e. she has a family. I feel like I have so many ideas I'd like to do, maybe too many at this point. More than anything, I think I need clarity on how to choose what comes next. Mona, that's a really great question. And I think that's something that a lot of people, a lot of ambitious professionals find themselves at this particular crossroads. Miracle is agreeing with me. That was a really great question. It's also a very layered question. But before anything, I want to speak to something that I kind of noticed underlying in this, where you had just expressed some embarrassment about feeling scattered and feeling like you should kind of know this. And here's what I'll say to that. I want everyone, Crystal agrees. I want everyone who has felt this or is currently feeling this to just understand that there is no shame in realizing a new portion of a vision, right? Like or having a new goal. I want to challenge everyone to drop the shame attached with feeling as if I'm too late for this, or I've arrived at this conversation too late. I've arrived at this decision point too late. There is never a too late when it comes to actually fulfilling what you feel like you're called to fulfill. There is never a I missed the boat, or I should have made this decision, I should have made this turn. The fact that you are asking this question in this moment right now is all the proof and all the validation that you're ready to handle and ready to accept everything that is to come. And so while I understand the sentiment behind it, believe me, I do. I don't want you walking around with the shame of feeling like, man, I should have done this 30 years ago, or, I should have this figured out by now. Who said you had to have it figured out by now? I believe, especially when you're shifting into something that's going to be even more impactful, that's most likely going to impact the lives of other people, a lot of times you don't know all of the pieces. And that clarity typically only comes after you've made a decision. That decision, whether to invest in you finding it out, or invest in your development, or invest in, or to decide that you're going to truly, truly, truly go down the path of understanding what it is to craft this new journey, this new step, to pick this new step, you're definitely not too late. And there's no shame in feeling like, I don't even know where to start, because everyone feels the same way. Everyone finds themselves at some point in life where you're just confused. And it's like, there's so many options. I'm not, and you said point blank, let me go back so I don't misquote. You said, you've worked 30 years. So it's not that you're doubting your capability. It's the clarity. And I don't know when you joined the email list, but something I want to just pull out is that I believe, especially when you're coming into alignment with your calling, it's not always the clarity that's needed. A lot of times it's the courage. And I get that you have the family, that you have your kids, you have people to think of, which makes it all the more complex, but it also makes it even more simple, because this is now being motivated not just internally, but also for the sake of others who need to hear your voice, who need to hear that story, who need to be able to interact with the best version that you're going to be becoming as a result of this decision. So first of all, I just want to, applaud you for even being honest and being candid enough to say, like, you know what, I feel scattered. But if I could add any piece that might help in terms of bringing some cohesion to what you are deciding. I believe a lot of times when we're in this space, we stay scattered because we do it alone. So because we don't feel like other people are making these same decisions or making these same transitions, or we feel like everyone else has figured it out, or, I've worked 30 years, like I should know this by now. We feel as if this needs to be an isolating process, or like this is your problem. But I would really offer you or invite you to see in a different way that this is not something that you have to figure out by yourself. And it's not something that has to be perfect on the first step. And so when you don't know what to do, when I know you said you're ready, but you're not sure what you're ready for. I would really encourage you to take some time to reflect in your life, determine or take some time to reflect and think about the vision of what do you see yourself doing in that most ideal sense. How does your lifestyle look? Who are you impacting? Who are you speaking to? Who are you helping? Who's coming up to you and saying, man, because of this, I can now, be better, or because of this, I now understand. It doesn't necessarily have to be inspirational or motivational in nature. Maybe it's something that's a little bit more tactile, but I would assume, based off of just all the interactions that I've had with my clients, that there's some sort of narrative, or there's some sort of picture in your head that you want to now achieve, that you are now becoming serious about. And this is the decision point. This is the making point. So I would really encourage you to be courageous in writing out what that looks like for you, and not trying to align it with what you're doing now. It may look totally different from what you're doing now. If someone would have told me, not 7 years ago, oh, Christina, you're going to be in entrepreneurship, I would have called them a liar to my face. This is not what I had planned. This was not my path. I was definitely the person who was I'm going to rise the corporate ladder. I'm going to do what I need to do, meet who I need to meet. I'm going to, run the company. Like that was my idea of my path. And I'm no longer on it. And and I've embraced that even more, because this is more in alignment with my calling. And so I say all that to say is, take all those scattered thoughts and put it down. And I wouldn't look at them at shame and say like, oh, they're scattered. More than likely, there's a beautiful narrative that links all of them together. Where we get in trouble is when we try to do everything at once. And so after you've really taken time to reflect on what that vision might be, or what that vision could look like, don't feel like you have to eat the vision in one bite. What's the first step? What are the natural doors that are open to you right now that you can start investigating? And I don't know the nature of what you want to do. Like, I'm not sure if you want to go into entrepreneurship. I'm not sure if you want to go into business. You said, you wanted to shift into something that allowed you to take that next step and share your story. I will say, historically, with people that I've worked with, as they're sharing their story, they are sharing it in a way that's either in a speaking capacity, or they've taken some part of their experience and either turned it into a book, or they've turned it into a program, or they've become a coach, or something along those lines. And so if that's something that you're interested in doing, especially from a paid perspective, where it's a thought leader perspective, it's now taking those scattered thoughts and seeing where the natural doors are opening, but also seeing as those natural doors are opening, where is that need, and who is that need addressing? Who is that target audience that's going to need whatever it is that you had to have? I think what I want to do is take the weight off of making it seem like you have to get it right, or it has to be exactly precise in that next step. That next step may lead you to taking on a client or a role or a program that you never want to do again. I know I can speak from my own personal experience. I've done programs, I've offered services, I've had signature talks that I would never want to touch again. One of my biggest corporate contracts, it was with a university system. It was one of the biggest deals I've ever done. I will never do that again. Not in the same way that I did it, because it's not a topic that I was necessarily passionate about. It wasn't something that really allowed me to shine through, but I wouldn't have known that had I not learned from that experience. So it doesn't need to be perfection. It just needs to be something that allows you to get some traction and keep taking the step forward. But I will say it gets dangerous when you do it alone. It gets dangerous when you are disappointed, or you're feeling like you have to deal with those blows privately, right? So really putting it down on paper, but also figuring out a vehicle in which you can still pursue these opportunities in a way that you can leverage. And it looks like you want to share your story. And so what I will also say to that is there are so many people that I meet who have stories that are so, first of all, everyone has a story worthy to be shared. However, understanding that it's not so much about your story, but it's more so about the lessons from it and how is it going to move someone else forward or enlighten them in some way. I know my TED Talk, and I know I don't want to get too far into this because somebody asked me a question about the TED process, and I'll get to that as well. But my TED Talk was from a segment of my story. However, it wasn't necessarily about me. It's what I learned from it. And that's how I've been able to monetize it and work with these brands and work with these companies and, go back and consult for the Disneys, consult for the NBA, consult for the McDonald's, was from the way I was able to position it. So you are definitely not behind. You're not too late. That 30 years that you spent working lay the groundwork, right? Like that was your content. That's the experience that you were really birthing and allows you to be a master of whatever it is that you're going to go forward and talking about. And so it seemed like a lot of people related to this question. So I'm so glad. Thank you so much for being brave and asking it, because it is something that does carry some shame, and it shouldn't. It really shouldn't. You should be able to understand that you have the grace to evolve into who you want to become. I know, especially as ambitious professionals, we don't always give ourselves the grace to change our mind, or the grace to try something new, or the grace to say, like, you know what, this vision is expanding. So I hope that's helpful, but I also want you to pour that grace on yourself and allow you to evolve into the thought leader that I know you're becoming. So I'm super excited about that, and to hear what comes of that. I see. There's a piggyback to, so before I go too far, there's a piggyback to Mona's question. This is still the same question. Okay, great. Follow up to Mona's question. Great. Thank you, Miracle. You mentioned how it's dangerous to navigate this alone. What are suggestions that you have for how to pivot with community, paid and unpaid options? Really good question, Miracle. I truly believe, and I'll start with the community that I've crafted, because I'll brag on myself. I think I have one of the best communities out there. I think for anyone who's looking to go into paid speaking and thought leadership and expertise, I would really highly recommend you get in community with the like-minded professionals who are in my corporate speaker masterclass. I think there's one thing about understanding that you want to use your story. It's another thing of knowing how to leverage it in a way that's going to allow you to get 4, 5, 6-figure deals. So I know there are some people on this call who went through it. Vouch for me, so people know I'm not lying, people. But I believe that we had one of the greatest communities, because from beginning to end, we teach you how do you take the breadth of your experience right now, and how do you translate it into a way that's going to allow you to be seen in a light that positions you as that expert thought leader, that positions you as that expert speaker, that positions you for those paid opportunities. It's the same model that that I taught one of my clients to use, and she was able to get that $1.2 million deal. But the real beauty, regardless, I mean, take me aside, the real beauty was seeing these women interact with each other and really uplift each other and challenge each other, and, post on each other's social media channels and encourage each other and let them know, especially in these sessions, we understand that it's scary. Like, everyone talks about like shifting to the next level. Even I use this language, like coming into your best self, being a visionary, all of these things, but no one really engages in the conversation about how that is scary, especially when you're crafting a new path, right? And so it's great to know that there are people around you, that's surrounding you, that's really working to do the same thing. And so I'll say in my own program, and I'll give a little a little spiel about it. We have 4 different master classes. We take you through master class number 1, which is the plan, where you create your transition strategy. You get clear on that vision that I was really talking about with Mona, and we figure out what accountability structure works for you. I think in reference to your question about community, understanding how you like to be supported is key. Some people like the micromanaging. Some people are like, listen, give me the goal and that's all that I need. But if you align yourself with communities that are dislike the way that you want to be supported, that's going to be more cataclysmic to your progress than it is beneficial. And so understanding how you want to be supported is key. Second, during the masterclass, we really get clear on your package. So one of the things that contributes to the scattered thoughts is like figuring out, what do I even offer? Especially if you worked in the traditional 9-to-5 space, like I worked in the traditional 9-to-5 space for over a decade, almost a decade and a half. I couldn't even fathom. I'm like, what do I offer? What is the service that I offer? And I had no clue that you could actually monetize your experience. You can monetize your talk. So the same companies, the same caliber of companies who I used to work for, who, you know, I would get a monthly salary for, I now made the same amount that I would get in a month in an hour of sharing my story. I mean, in an hour, that is not an exaggeration. So understanding that there is a market for your expertise and your story. And so we figure out that package. Third thing you need to know, and this is what we cover in our community, is your positioning. How do you attract the buyers? How do you attract the high-end buyers that's going to allow you to really get that traction and to really understand what you have to offer? There are people who just want to glean and pick your brain, like it wasn't Mona, I think Vanessa was saying, there are people who just want to experience you for free, and there are people who will pay you 6 figures to experience you, right? And so understanding the difference is key. And so what we do is make sure that you're clear on your positioning. And then finally, you're pitching. Like, how do we make sure that you're pitching to the right people, you're talking to the right people? But more so than pitching, because it's not like the salesy type of like, oh, I'm posting every 5 seconds. I don't post every 5 seconds. If you follow me on social media, you know I'm a little bit of a ghost. Like, I really don't post like that. However, positioning yourself in spaces where these buyers are just takes the inside knowledge. And so I basically explain that particular process and get you clear on your pricing. And so I put my community ahead of anybody's I know, like in terms of the caliber of women and in terms of what we are able to accomplish together, having all the pieces in place. So whenever you get these opportunities, you can start running. Like, I put it ahead of anyone I know. So I'll pause for that, Miracle. I know you didn't ask for all of that, but when you said community, you gave me leeway. I put my community ahead of anything. And actually, I'll be opening it in the fall. But what I'm going to do as I'm talking is, I didn't plan on doing this, but let me find it. I'm going to share the link. So if this is something, if you know that you want that support, if you know you're ready to really position yourself in that way, but you really just don't know how and you want the steps, that's what we do. We meet and we have 4 different master classes, and in between each week, it's an implementation week. And the last final month is an implementation month, so that you can have the time to actually understand what you learn, implement what you learn, improvise. So you're learning in a group, but there's also that one-on-one coaching component where you'll get a private session with me, where you're going to get completely clear. We're going to get all the kinks out. We're going to get exactly what's needed, and you're going to get feedback from me for every step of the process. I've been in coaching programs. I've seen other people don't offer what I have to offer. They just don't. I usually don't talk about myself like this, so this is unlike me, but like, they just don't. They can't hold a candle. Like, they really can. So I'm going to put it in the chat. And so if you already know that this is the type of community that you want to join with, I'm going to put it in there. And I haven't completely opened it, but get on the wait list and we'll set up a call. We'll set up a meeting and you can learn more. So I just put it in the chat. Oh, I just looked. Thank you, Wanda. Oh, yes, Wanda. Thank you so much. Yes, by far the best. I agree. I've been on, yes, she got 2 TV features on ABC and NBC, and she was ready. She had the talking points. When I say she was ready, I saw the clips. I watched them with my family. She was ready. Tracy was in it. Kay was in it. Yes. Thank you all for vouching for me. So I'm not just out there on a limb, like just saying stuff. Like I really like for real. And so our community is great. And so I would say if you're looking for it, if you're trying to figure out how to become a paid thought leader, join our community. On the other hand, Miracle, because I want to answer both of your questions. You were talking about just options that you can do organically as well. I'm going to be honest. I think things are a little bit hit or miss. I have been in communities and in partnership with people where it's like, okay, we kind of have a brain trust. And here's why I say it's hit or miss. If you're anything like the clients that I typically have or the professionals that are typically in my programs, what's going to happen is that you're going to end up going into fixer mode, because you probably have the ability, tell me if I'm wrong, but you probably have the ability to hear other people's problems and figure out a solution very quickly. It probably doesn't take much from you to be able to find out, okay, they're dealing with this, do this, and you're set. And what I found is that especially people who are high achievers, we're very capable and very much able to fix other people's problems. But the frustration is we don't always get that same effort or that same clarity in return. So for instance, you might have been helping someone else in community and you gave them a masterpiece, right? Like you gave them all the answers. Yeah, this is how you fix this problem. This is how you network. This is how you position yourself. But when it comes to you, they don't know how to help you. Now, I won't say that's exact. See, I knew, and Miracle, I'm letting you know, I know this. I've met enough people to know that it always becomes lopsided. So I don't discourage it. I won't say it's impossible. I'll just say there is the added difficulty of being incredibly competent and incredibly targeted and being able to think in a visionary, strategic manner, and understanding that usually in our collectives like that, you might be the person. And so you find yourself exhausted helping everybody else, and they're all happy getting results, and you're not, because you didn't get that same back. And so I would say it's almost what is it called? The canon event. It's almost like when I see it, I'm like, ugh, you can try. I have tried. I have been down this road. I have tried. And I always find myself a little embittered because of it, or just not really getting what I need to get. So I would say, I would challenge anyone who's really thinking about it. If you're able to craft that community where people, it's a little bit more equal in distribution, then by all means go for it. But if you're ready and like, okay, I want to do this in concert with a group of people who are like-minded, who are ready, who, might be in different spaces. We had people who were already in full-time entrepreneurship. We had people who were in job transitions. We also had people who had no desire to leave their jobs, and that's completely fine. Paid thought leadership and paid speaking and being an expert in that arena is not prescriptive in nature. You could do it so many different ways. The question is, do you have a plan? Do you have the resources? Do you have the materials to be ready to fully take advantage of the opportunities that come up as needed? And so that's what's going to be important. I'll say, even from an example, for me, I experienced not too long ago, or last week, I was talking to a company, and they said, you know what, we want to work with you. And they asked me basically for a list of documents, and it's only because I've gone through this process that I was able to rattle it off right away. And within a week, I was able to jump the line because I had my stuff ready. Same thing when I was able to secure McDonald's as a client. That we met for the first time on a Tuesday, and I was on a plane by that next Monday going to their corporate headquarters to meet with their executive team. So when opportunities come, they move quick. And if you aren't ready, it will be fumbled, right? And so knowing the pieces that you need to have in place, it's going to be incredibly important. So I'm going to get off my soapbox right now. I'm glad you asked that question, but I hope that was helpful. I definitely highly recommend my community, but just be very clear about the type of person you are. If you are looking to craft it elsewhere, right? So if you are the type of person who you kind of are always the expert, more than likely that's the role that you're going to take in these particular groups. And if you're fine with that, that's totally cool. But just make sure that you're getting the same back and the same input, and you're hearing from people who have actually done what you're trying to do. They're not just guessing, they've actually done it. All right, somebody asked, how do you go about investing in yourself, especially as a young woman? I think that's a great question. Here's what I'll say. I won't speak as if my experience is universal, but here's what I'll say, especially as when I started this journey, I was a young woman. I'm no longer young. I look younger than I am. People always think I'm younger than I am. I'm not that young. But when I first started in this journey, I was like really closing in towards middle age, to be honest. And something that I realized is that if you are someone who's just very accomplished, if you are someone who is ambitious, who is always kind of at the top of their game, and things don't come, I won't say they don't come hard for you, but you're able to quickly develop a system in which you can rise, you can achieve. Mentorship for you at that point, or investing in yourself at that point, is tricky, because you have to be very clear about the type of person who is going to get you to a point of action. Let me explain. I'm sure everyone has people, or everyone has heard stories, right, about hearing from like these gurus or people who try to inspire you, tell you to do all of those things. I heard all the same people. However, I think my radar, or my rate of acceptance for fluff and stuff that just doesn't matter, is very high. And so I say this and people laugh, but it's very true, and I don't know how to say it another way. So I'll just say it the way I say it. I ignore most people, full stop, period. I don't mean that ironically. I don't mean that as satire. I mean, Christina Joy Whittaker ignores the vast majority of humans on this planet. It's something I've done all my life. I think I'm just wired that way. And so the reason why that's important is because I think, especially if you're someone with a vision, right? If you're like, you know what, I want to share my story, I want to share my expertise, I want to get paid, like, not just, paltry money, I want to get paid big money to do what I need to do, then there's a decision that you have to make to understand that you have to invest in people who are actually, whose voice will actually translate in your head. So someone could tell me to go run a mile, and I'm like, get out of my face. Someone who I respect, who I actually want to emulate their success in some way, and not just emulate their success. They speak in a way that motivates me, or like makes me see clearly, or understand in a way that I typically don't understand. If they told me the same thing, you would get a very different result. And so I think part of investing in yourself is knowing the type of person you are, and knowing the type of support you need. I see people, and I've talked to so many people, and I've seen them to sign up for coaching programs, or, made decisions. And I already know, I'm like, that's not going to work for you. It's not that it's a bad thing. I just know that's not what you need at this point. And so you have to be very honest about where you're trying to go, really what you're trying to accomplish. And is it going to be done in a way that's going to be conducive with your learning, that's going to be conducive with getting you to a point of action? And you're the only one who can really answer that. There's going to be so many people saying like, oh, I can do this. This is how you do this, or try to be prescriptive, but you're the only one who can make that decision. So I would just be very clear about the vision that you have. And if you feel like someone is going to move you closer to that vision, reach out to them, ask them questions, ask them about their working style, ask them about their coaching style. For me, I'm someone who I'm a blunt person. I'm pretty straight to the point. If you are the person who needs tons of coddling, I'm not that person for you. I can never be that person, right? But that doesn't make you wrong for needing that. That just means you have a different style that you respond to, right? And so really understanding yourself and understanding that investing in yourself is the best investment that you'll ever make. It will always have a return. Now, where people get in danger is if like they don't see it right away, or if in the next hour like you don't see the return. You are planting a seed. You are saying, you know what? I believe in the things that I want to accomplish. I believe in this vision. I believe in this calling. I believe I'm supposed to be doing this. And I believe that there's going to be grace for me in this process as I'm figuring it out. So I believe that you investing is coming in alignment with that belief, which allows you to open up the door to more opportunity. So I think that's a great follow-on question. I know you asked it anonymously, but if it wasn't clear, go ahead and put it in the Q&A again, and I'll get to it. But really be sure that your investment is going to be in good soil. I think one of the other things is to ask people who have worked with the people that you've worked with, or that you want to work with. That's why I ask the people on this call, I'm like, hey, vouch for me. Like, don't just hear it from my mouth. Like, other people should be able to say a consistent story about what it's like to work with you, right? And so look for evidence of success, look for testimonials, look to see that they have done or they have gotten the results that they claim to get. But I hope that's helpful. If you do have a follow-up question, go ahead and ask it in this chat. But thank you for submitting it. I so appreciate it. And I am looking at time. I do want to be respectful of the time. I do think we've gotten through much of the questions, but I do want to, oh no, there was one. Okay. Monica, what are the main steps to land a TED Talk? That's a great question. That's actually covered in the Corporate Speaker Masterclass in detail. And so we do a whole bonus class on that. So if you are interested in learning, like truly, I take you through the application, I take you through the questions, I take you on how to source the events, I take you through all of that. And so if you want a rundown of all that, I would encourage you to once again join the Corporate Speaker Masterclass. I'm just going to put it in the I'll put the link again, just in case you did miss that. But I do want to respond to what I think is most important to help you in terms of if you are someone who does want to land a TED Talk. I was able to do a TED Talk. I did TEDx Alpharetta. And I think there are very valuable questions before you get up to this point that you should ask yourself. So first, the first question I would ask myself is, what do you want to talk about? And the second question I would ask yourself is, where do you want it to take you? The reason why I ask these two questions more than anything is because there's a lot of people who kind of put like, oh, I want to do a TED Talk. That's always been on my list of goals. That's always been something I wanted to do. And they can't really answer why. They're not necessarily sure about what they want out of it. They're not necessarily sure about what they want to talk about. And all that's fine. You don't necessarily need to be completely clear on that at all times in your life. Like, that's not a requirement. However, I will say if you're gearing up to do an application, I would ask those particular questions. So first of all, what do you want to talk about? The first question, or one of the first questions on every TED application, every single one, they're going to ask you, what's your quote unquote big idea? So what are you going to say that people need to hear? That's essentially what the question is. And so as you're applying or as you're thinking about doing a TED Talk, it can't just be, oh, well, my big idea is because I always want to give one. You know what I mean? So have something defined, have a point of view that you want to talk about. It doesn't necessarily have to be new, and it doesn't necessarily have to be earth-shattering. What it does need to be is relevant to the community where that TED Talk is going to take place. And so in my mastermind, masterclass, I break down all the steps of how to relate in that way, because there's a certain way that you should talk about your topic in order to gain traction. There are certain pieces that people look for that's going to be most helpful. I do think for this next masterclass, I'm going to bring in someone to help coach people a little bit more on one with that process, because I know like that's a big deal and people really want that. But there's a certain way that you have to talk about it to make it salient. So first of all, really defining what do you want to talk about. Something I want to just add some grace around is feeling like the topic needs to be totally new, innovative, and mastered by you. It doesn't need to be originated by you per se. And even in terms of your topic, depending on your event, you might even have room to shape it a little bit, to form it a little bit. There are people who came in kind of thinking they were going to talk about one thing, and it kind of took a turn or a pivot. So depending on the type of event, and it does matter the type of event, but depending on the type of event, you just need to sell the case ahead of time about why you're an expert in something, why you're a thought leader in something. So it's just helpful from that standpoint. But don't feel like you're putting yourself in a hole or being pigeonholed because of something, because of what you say originally. So one, really determine what you want to talk about. And second, where do you want it to take you? There are so many people who have done TED Talks who like barely get any views on their talks, which is fine, right? You don't have to have a lot of views on your talk, but they're not exactly sure what they want to do with it. And so that's where my training, especially in the masterclass, that's where I talk about is how do you leverage this into something that's actually going to allow you to shift into that thought leader role. So I would say my business really took off because of the way I was able to leverage my talk. I was able to make multiple six figures off of one topic. I talked about one topic for almost a year straight, and I was able to work with some of the biggest brands because of how I positioned it. However, a lot of people don't know. And so you're coming into having a TED Talk about how to tie your shoe, right? And realizing that after you do that particular talk, you want nothing to do with that particular topic. And so it's a whole strategy behind it. And I would do it a disservice to try to truncate it into, the next, 5 minutes or so. But the two main questions, more than anything, I would ask myself is, what do you want to talk about? So get kind of a little bit more clear about the topic. And where do you want it to take you? So basically, how do you want to leverage the talk going forward? That's going to partially determine, what you talk about in the first place, for one, but it's also going to determine where you want to really kind of put yourself or insert yourself into the TED community. So I hope that was helpful in reference to that particular talk. I know that's a question I get a lot. And so if people do have kind of piggybacks, or if you have another question about that, you can put it in the Q&A or you can put it in the chat. I am going to shift to another question to make sure that I answer it before we are out of time. But the last official question, and I'll say this again before we close, because I don't want to close prematurely. If you do have a burning question that you want to be answered on this call, while I'm answering this next question, please put it in the Q&A so I can get back to it. But Karen is saying, I'm really curious about transitioning into speaking or consulting to some extent, but I'm not clear about the process as well as any risk or benefits. Can you help walk me through the steps? Also, do you need certification to begin? And how will I explain this to my current job? So that's like 5 questions in one. Broad strokes. Here's what I'll say. You want to transition into speaking or consulting to some extent. You don't necessarily have to know exactly where you want to go at this juncture. What you need to figure out, and I know we talked about this last time, but what you really need to figure out is, where is there a need, and where does that need align with your expertise? That's what's going to allow you to get cash flow. That cash flow is then going to it's going to allow you to get cash flow if you have a pricing system in place. After you get that cash flow, that's going to buy you a little bit more traction and a little bit more time to figure out, how do I really go full blown into being a speaker professionally? How do I go full blown into being a consultant professionally? Quite frankly, there's a strategy to speaking for free. There's a strategy to giving advice for free, but knowing when that needs to shift into something that's for pay is where people get stuck, and they get stuck in the cycle of free as opposed to knowing how to leverage something into 4, 5, 6, 7 figure offers, right? And so be clear about your expertise and what you actually want to talk about. Don't talk about stuff that you don't want to talk about. What do you actually want to talk about, right? But where is there a need for your topic? Where are people currently talking about your topic? Is there a nuance that you're offering that's going to allow you to differentiate yourself in the marketplace? I never believe that a market is necessarily too saturated. However, there's a strategy to figuring out, like, how do you, in a saturated market, define yourself as the only answer or the only person who could respond in this particular way. And so in terms of the risk and the benefits, it looks like you're still employed because you were asking, or you're traditionally employed because you were asking, how do you explain this at your current job? Here's what I always say to that. If you don't want them to know, don't tell them. It's none of their business. If you, as long as you have, let me add this caveat. You don't necessarily need to take this advice, but here's what I'll say, and you can choose to accept it or not. If you have not signed a non-compete agreement, if you are not offering trade secrets, if you are not sharing anything that's proprietary in nature that's going to be damaging to the reputation or the livelihood of the organization that you are currently working for, and if you have not signed anything that is binding you from generating income outside of your current workplace. So I would encourage everyone, look at the agreements that you sign, look at what's on paper, look at the policies, look at the documentation. But if none of that is in place, then you are fully allowed to take opportunities that are for pay to speak. And so understanding that you have to do your due diligence to make sure that there's nothing legally binding you or that's legally going to stop you. If that is not in existence, then it's about figuring out what is that topic? What is that package offering going to look like? How are you going to develop one talk that's going to net you 6 figures? How are you going to develop one expertise that everyone now goes to you for? And so that's what that question would entail. And so there's tons of benefits. There's countless benefits to it. There's agency, there's, being able to be creative. There's being able to work with brands in a way that you never, would have been able to work with them for. I would say, especially fiscally, when I received my first check for an hour of my work that equaled my 6-figure pay for a month, I was sold. That's all I needed to see. Right. And so while that may be some people's story, maybe sometimes people have to lead up to it. I don't want to feign as if like every single engagement is going to be like that, because it's not. But there are times when like momentum is just in your favor and you're going to be able to get those opportunities. So there's definitely benefits to that. I think, to be honest, if I look at risk, the biggest risk is not giving yourself a chance. Not giving yourself the opportunity to investigate or to be curious or to evolve into what you think like speaking and consulting is. I would say for me, before I got into speaking full-time and consulting, I didn't even know it was an industry 3 months prior to when I got into it. I found out it was an industry. A month later, I was laid off, and then I found myself in it. Like, there was no buildup. There was no process. There was nothing that had to certify me to say, like, I'm allowed to speak about this. No, I had an expertise and there was a demand, and I positioned myself from that. That's what I really share in the corporate speaker masterclass, though, because there are a lot of roadblocks that I ran into that I wish I would have known. I wish I would have known before I started. But now that I know, I'm able to share that experience and share that expertise with other people. I'm going to also kind of answer one of the other questions about, like, how do you know when to invest? I think the best people are able to collapse time for you, right? Like, they're able to say, like, listen, I struggled for 5 years, but I'm going to tell you in these next 8 weeks, like, this is everything I learned, so you don't have to run into the same roadblocks. So you need people who are able to collapse time like that and set out the process. But I think the biggest risk that outweighs any other risk is not believing that there's a need for your voice and your story and your expertise, because there is always that need. Believe me, like, people are waiting to hear what you have to offer. And I know sometimes we get in our heads, especially as high achievers, a lot of times we're so self-deprecating. And it's not like you're doing it for attention. It's not like you're doing it for someone else to pat you up. It's just, we can be very critical of our own selves. And if we aren't coming out as perfect, or if we aren't coming out as knowing everything, it's it paralyzes us, right? It stops us from doing anything. But when I tell you, when I hear people, sometimes I still even have to work on, the cognitive connection when I hear people say like, this is how you impacted me, to me realizing that, to be honest, it all started from a decision. It all started from one decision to say like, I'm going to take a chance on this. I'm actually going to take a chance on myself. And I had never done it before. I didn't have an entrepreneurial bone in my body. That's not something I dreamed of. I know people talk about having lemonade stands when they were younger. Not me. I was the consumer. I bought the lemonade. I didn't feel like making a stand like that. I just never had that. That's not how I was wired. However, whenever it wakes up in you is when it wakes up. And I think you can get into a cycle where you keep questioning it, but don't, get in community, figure out the steps that's needed, and just take a chance on believing that if you have the desire, there's going to be a need for your voice, and there's going to need for your story in terms of speaking and consulting. So Karen, thank you for that question. I didn't hit on this directly, but no. Do you need a certification? No, you just need to know what you're talking about. Don't go out spewing information that you don't know. Don't be an expert on anything that you don't know. But you are an expert in something, and you don't necessarily need to be certified per se. Now, I will say, depending on what you're actually doing, there might be some additional certifications or requirements to go into places. But I will say, as someone who has made multiple six figures working with organizations, no one has asked me, like, do you have a certificate or do you have this? They hear I can solve a problem. They have a problem that needs to be solved, and we come together and do business. That's not the case for everything. Like sometimes, like especially if you're going through the supplier, the minority supplier portals, like there's a couple of more hoops. So I won't say it's one note for everything, but the way I do business, I am typically able to just go in and talk to the executives, identify the need, and fix the need as necessary. How do you explain that to your job? Like I said, if it's not their business, and if you haven't signed anything against it, then it's not your responsibility. You don't have to let them know. You're allowed to do this. What I will say, and then I'll close out if nobody has any other questions, but what I will say is, before you start updating everything on LinkedIn, and I don't remember the exact steps, I'll probably link it in the next email out with this replay. Go to your settings, and I think it's under privacy, like turn off the notifications for when you update your profile. If you're someone who's about to like go update it in the next like 5 minutes or so, turn off the notifications in your profile. That's going to allow, or the public notifications in your profile. That's going to ensure that at least, even if you're making some changes or repositioning yourself or rebranding yourself a little bit on LinkedIn, that it doesn't ping everybody in your community, right? Like you can do it, you can save the changes, and it doesn't get blasted a notification out to everyone. So people aren't asking you like, oh, what are you doing? What's this about? Like, just take it off. Take off those notifications if that's a concern for yours. If you don't care, keep it on. But if you do, take it off. I'm not seeing any other questions in the Q&A, and I'm looking at time. I went over again, apologies. But what I will say, if you are looking for community, and I wasn't expecting to really talk about it on this call, but thank you, Miracle, for giving me the opportunity to. You were a miracle. I would say really, really consider joining the corporate speaker masterclass. That's where you're going to get all the steps and learn everything that's actually needed to package yourself. So as you're figuring it out right now, as you're trying to figure out how do I go forward, you don't have to do that alone. And so we work with you step by step. We go through your plan, we go through your packaging, we go through your pricing, and we go through your strategy of pitching. We go through all of that. And so be sure that you get on the wait list so that when it does open, we are kicking off at the top of September. And so I know there's some people who talked to me like a little bit earlier in the summer, and they're already on board. And so I won't say how many spots are left, but if you know that this is for you, look at the site, get on the wait list. Or if you really are already sure, I'm going to put my email in the chat, and just send me an email there. Or if if we're connected on LinkedIn, send me a DM or something on LinkedIn, and I can set up a time to explain it a little bit more. But if you really are like, okay, I want to do this, and you're ready, we're ready for you. And so I would love to get you into community with me, but I hope, this was about the Mentor Monday community. I hope this was helpful. These were excellent questions. And so we are going to meet next week. If you do have questions, you'll get the replay of this, but you'll also get a form to submit any additional questions that happen next week. Thank you for hanging with me. It was so great to see everyone. Before I fully am gone, Keisha, your hand has been up and I came to you before. I want to make sure you don't have a question, but if you don't, so good to see everyone. Thank you for participating, and I look forward to talking to you next week. Bye, everyone.